Hello, welcome to the Talking with Wooly show. I am William Ridley, and for this week's show, we are taking an educational route for those educational buffs out there, and are discussing current facts and updates involving the education of our children today. My guest today is Benjamin C. Dover, who happens to be an expert in education.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think I am quite the expert. So, what I am here to say is this: accountability. This is an important subject in our educational system at the moment. Here, let me point out the facts. While we, as a nation, are trying to show accountability to the learning of our children, we are putting in play high-stakes testing, which are the practices of using students' performance on single assessments to make major decisions about students' school personnel or overall school quality. And by using end-of-level tests and state tests to determine students' placement, teacher salary, and the quality of the school.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, well, it sounded all dandy in 2001. I went around and interviewed many respectable people involved with that.
Testing often operates as a smoke screen for serious problems that we are unwilling to face.
That little red schoolhouse over there is actually the entrance to the U.S. Department of Education. Inside, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people working to enforce one of the weirdest and most punitive laws ever passed. NCLB demands that schools' test scores improve so that by the year 2014, there is no achievement gap.
The real problem with No Child Left Behind at the very core is that it's not a systems approach to fixing a systems problem.
High-stakes assessment has killed teachers learning and developing as assessors, because it has basically taken these external tests and then you look at that data. But what really helps students learn is assessment that is based in the classroom.
A standardized test is not going to teach them what that child needs to know, what that child needs to learn. The whole standardized test system is set up so that teachers don't even get the scores in a timely fashion so that they can plan instruction for those students.
And what the teachers want is not another test. We don't need another test to give to children to find out who the children are that are struggling. What the teachers want and what we're really asking is, how can we help these children? What can we do to really help the children who are struggling?
The testing and accountability of No Child Behind looks at different bands or levels. And some administrators, unfortunately, end up spending a lot of time focusing on students who are right below passing, that they put all their energies in helping those students get a little bit better. It's not actually an effort that's distributed equally among all students in helping each child grow.
Children who are at the very low end of the assessment ladder, who people believe have little chance to pass the test, are often not given resources that would help them learn, and those resources are put into the education of the children who are near the testing standard.
Most schools have to report AYP for 37 categories of kids, by ethnic group, by grade, by income level, so on. If any one category doesn't make AYP, the whole school is labeled a failure and all the kids can go somewhere else.
All students in our school were offered choice after we had a certain number of years in the failing category. And the students that chose to leave are those that were not failing. So the funds that are intended to help the students who are having the most difficulty in school end up being used to transport the students who are having a great deal of success in school.
I don't think parents understand, or the community in general, understand really what it means to be a passing school or a failing school.
What we've seen the last several years is the people that do the moving tend to be the children who are already achieving well, which means the school is just left even that further behind.
At schools that are quote-unquote failing, that they're given more and more of these kind of standardized tests, that most of their day is spent bubbling in and finding out that there's only one right answer to questions. And yet in more affluent schools, children are allowed to ask the questions. They're not told that there's only one right answer. That's not fair. That's not equitable. That's not just.
We need to get away from the agrarian calendar and the factory model. We don't all progress at the same rate. Any parent who's had more than one child can tell you they develop and hit their benchmarks at different times in their lives. Nobody does it exactly at the end of third grade.
I think a lot of educators who are frustrated with No Child Left Behind, it's not really the accountability. I think pretty much anybody who's in education because they really care about kids and learning, it's fine to be accountable. We just want to be accountable for the things that really matter. And that is really that each child is growing and is growing in those elements that make somebody whole. And the narrowed, tightened, high-stakes focus on just a small subset of those things is really kind of tearing that apart.
Sounds like kind of a crappy deal. I also did my own interview of a respectable person involved with that. He is a principal of a rural school in northern New England and didn't want to show his face on camera, but he was willing to share his story. His name is Dr. Charles Vanderbluff.
Oh, is this thing on already? Oh yeah, sure. Sure, Willie. We have very few minority students at our school, and only 5 students in that particular group. As a result of difficult family circumstances, one of those 5, a 16-year-old, lives on his own and comes to school only about 40% of the time. His performance on the annual assessment pulled the average scores for his group way down. If we truly wanted our test results to look good for the group, we should just have let him drop out, something he was inclined to do anyway. Instead, we did everything we could to keep him in school. Our decision was certainly in the student's best interest, but it was a costly one in terms of achievement result we reported for the school year. We became a failing school.
That is quite the sad story there.
Yes, Wooly, it is.
Well, let me ask Mr. Dover, is there anything to be done?
I think we're working on it. Here's an address by the president himself addressing this problem back in February.
The goals of No Child Left Behind were the right ones. Standards and accountability, those are the right goals. Closing the achievement gap, that's a good goal. That's the right goal. We've got to stay focused on those goals, but we've got to do it in a way that doesn't force teachers to teach to the test or encourage schools to lower their standards to avoid being labeled as failures. That doesn't help anybody. Certainly doesn't help our children in the classroom. So we determined we need a different approach. So when it comes to fixing what's wrong with No Child Left Behind, we've offered every state the same deal. We've said, if you're willing to set higher, more honest standards than the ones that were set by No Child Left Behind, then we're going to give you the flexibility to meet those standards.
So, thank you for joining me, Mr. Dover and Dr. Vanderbluff. Before we go, I have one more guest that wants to talk about the Family Educational Right and Privacy Act.
Yes, thank you, William.
My name is George Washington, and I would like to say a thing or two about what I think future teachers should be aware of. This is regarding the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It was passed in 1974, and it gives students and parents access to school records and limits others' access to the records. It also says that you cannot ask students about their political views, sexual preference, or illegal behaviors. You cannot post test scores in a way that would let others know individual scores, and you cannot distribute papers in a way to let others see scores. Just be aware of these things. And one more thing. Remember that we should all have the same goal here. So try to get along and cooperate with parents. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week, and we thank our guests for giving us such interesting information. And we hope you all tune in next week. Thank you.
And don't you come back no more. What you see? Hit the road, yeah. And don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, yeah. And don't you come back no more. Oh, woman, this woman, don't you treat me so mean. You're the
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.